This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
GPS, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Mark?
You know, I underneath this, I think I've got the newest swag, and you've got Swag Central as your office.
Oh, no. There's so much of it that we had to take over an empty office.
Did you move it all out?
There was almost none left in my office, and when the new delivery came in, there was so much of it that it was apparent that it would not fit in my office, so we literally kind of took over an entire empty office downstairs.
The definition of commandeered.
Yeah.
Now, don't we have, I think we had some really early winners in the week, didn't we?
Yes, there were a couple. Let's see here. From last Sunday, you had one that you liked that said, give up mentioning midweek never happens, which that turned out to be accurate. And let's
get a t-shirt for that.
And then yeesh, Trump has to go to town on a mic for me to switch from the podcast back to YouTube. That's pretty funny as well.
Yeah, I thought so.
And I think those were the main two. The other two, I believe, were from last week.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, you'll send them out. I noticed you had it out there kind of laid out very nicely for the mailings to go out. So there was some pent up demand on the GPS table. Yeah,
well, we were waiting for that shipment to come in, and once it finally did, a few people who were waiting on the backlog got in touch, and we got it all. We get it all out as fast as we can. So if you haven't received it yet, it did not go out until midweek. Mark was out of town, and I was waiting for him to come back before I did the shipment. But everyone who's waiting on merch, it should be there early this week. So enjoy. And almost everyone picked sweatshirts. Only one person so far has picked the brand new t-shirt, which I believe is what you're wearing. And I will say they are also very nice. So
Lucas did well. So quite a week. Trump in a decisive win, both popular, electoral. I mean, it was across the board, and fairly early in the evening.
Very early in the evening compared to at least the last 8 years, I would say. The channel I was watching didn't call it, but certainly started talking about it as if it was a fait accompli around 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is very early when you consider that the polls out west were still open.
Yeah, wild. And we have a new DA here in LA County. I've noticed since the election, the governor has, our governor in California has gone to, it's called a special legislative session to fund the fight, which
I believe he's using the term Trump-proof California, right?
Right. It's something on every angle. But the one for our show, what's fascinating to me is, did you see the filing? Did you see it? It almost sounds like it's rigged. I sent you the one pager. Here it is, filed in the United States District Court on November 8th. As a result, and this is filed by Molly Gaston, Senior Assistant Special Counsel under Jack Smith. And if you're watching on YouTube, Gary's got the PACER order up there. You can read it, Gary.
Yeah, it says there's it's in the matter of United States of America versus Donald J. Trump defendant. The government's unopposed motion to vacate briefing schedule as a result of the election held on November 5th, 2024. The defendant is expected to be certified as president-elect on January 6th, 2025, and inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. The government respectfully requests that the court vacate the remaining deadlines in the pretrial schedule to afford the government time to assess this unprecedented circumstance and determine the appropriate course going forward consistent with Department of Justice policy. By December 2nd, 2024, the government will file a status report or otherwise inform the court of the result of its deliberation. The government has consulted with defense counsel who do not object to this request. Respectfully, Special Counsel Jack Smith.
Yeah, it's an unopposed motion when the defense counsel does not object. By the way, that may be one of the great understatements of our time, that the defense counsel does not over there. While I'm talking about this, see if you can find a Mike Davis interview. I think it was with Benny Johnson. I could be mistaken, that I want to talk about right after this, because this order that you just had up on the screen is what Jack Smith has filed in front of Judge Chutkan in the District of Columbia. That is the so-called January 6th case. As you know, and we've talked about, Judge Cannon down in Florida has already dismissed the classified documents case. So these two federal cases are already Judge Cannon's is dead, and so they were taking an appeal to the 11th Circuit. I will bet you whatever amount of money you want to bet that goes nowhere. Full disclosure, I was hoping that the 11th Circuit would rule and affirm that decision, because then in Hunter Biden's case, that would have been a persuasive authority for the idea that the special counsel statute and the way these things are operating somebody should stick a fork in this once and for all. As you know, this is for 30 years I've been arguing that back then the independent counsel statute, when it was used against the Clinton and Susan McDougal, was an outrage. I think the subsequent special counsel statute, which is special as opposed to independent counsel, which is the iteration afterwards, is equally infirm and should be eliminated with, and maybe this will be the death knell for all of these kind of my personal prosecutor, as opposed to what the Department of Justice is supposed to be.
I think this might be the clip that you were requesting.
Oh, and this is interesting. So bye-bye to the two federal cases. What's left is the Georgia case, which we'll talk about in a second, and the Alvin Bragg case and the Tish James case. Here is Mike Davis, who a lot of people, I mentioned Eileen Cannon, it's been speculated that she would be nominated for the Attorney General. There's also people who are suggesting that this gentleman, Mike Davis, could be nominated for the Attorney General. Look what he's having to say about the Attorney General in New York State.
Let me just say this to Big Tish James, the New York Attorney General. I dare you to try to continue your lawfare against President Trump in his second term, because listen here, sweetheart, we're not messing around this time, and we will put your fat ass in prison for conspiracy against rights. And I promise you that. So think long and hard before you want to violate President Trump's constitutional rights or any other American's constitutional rights. It's not going to happen again.
We've been warning people on the show, Mike. This isn't the same Trump administration. Stop messing around. Don't rig elections. Don't illegally vote. Don't try the funny business, because we know the team this time and they are not effing around.
There's, the Attorney General, because the argument is I don't think that there is any path forward for either the Georgia case, which is, by the way, up in the Court of Appeals in the state of Georgia, or the case in the criminal case. It's not being prosecuted by Tish James, but by Alvin Bragg, where the judge has continued that. Judge Mershon has continued that until later this month. That case is going to evaporate as well, because it's clear, and it has been the law, that and notwithstanding the fact that, as you know, Gary, I've been early and often talking about how outrageous that prosecution was. That case will not, will either be, he's got one of three options. He can either stay it indefinitely, or he can, part of the problem they've got is there's a pending motion by Todd Blanche and Trump's defense that the post-conviction and these pre-sentencing, when the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in on the presidential immunity, which scuttled the January 6th Tanya Chutkan case, that same ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, even though that was federal, the law still applies to the prosecution by Alvin Bragg on the state case and the Manhattan DA, and that conviction couldn't stand with the new ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, number one, and number two, that there is, I don't see any path for a state prosecutor under the state laws to be prosecuting the president-elect or a president who's about to be inaugurated. And I'm sure that he will probably, I don't know that Alvin Bragg will move to set it aside, but this judge, who seems like he may have already seen the handwriting on the wall by virtue of the number of continuances and not engaging yet on the presidential immunity ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court. I think that case is dead. The Georgia case, man, Bonnie Willis got reelected. However, boy, that prosecutorial office is something down there. I mean, you and I have been following Young Thug. I mean, I didn't think we'd get to it today, but in context of the Trump prosecution, they could not have been talk about Keystone Cops in the Atlanta in the Georgia prosecution, both against Young Thug and in the prosecution of soon to be president again, Trump.
Yeah, they certainly have a lot of egg on their face right now. I think they realized that they were about to be in a lot of hot water, and that's why they ended up with this somewhat ridiculous plea deal with Young Thug after 10 or 11 months picking a jury and 900-day trial, and then just to basically say, all right, let's call it even and go our separate ways. So I have a hard time seeing them dying on that particular hill, even if she did just win re-election. I don't think that she necessarily wants to be in the crosshairs for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I don't. And by the way, I don't think the Court of Appeal, if they decided this right now, the state Court of Appeal would let this thing go on. And by the way, remember, it's also in the circuit where the special counsel is pending. There's also, that's the federal circuit, and there's been some federal litigation involving Mark Meadows and others who had said that they should not have been able to be prosecuted in the first place in the state. And given the immunity ruling that was subsequent to the indictment, that prosecution to me is dead on arrival. So he's going to run the table on all four of these. And if you remember I think we played a little bit of it in one of the previous episodes. I know that I've watched it, of the appellate court in New York State.
Yeah, we definitely played some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't. That ruling is not out yet, but I wouldn't give you 50 cents for that ruling.
No, the justices seemed very skeptical of the facts of that case and whether or not the government's position was something that they were going to get behind. So I'm not terribly certain that would have gone anywhere at the time, and now. So I'm sure it's even less certain.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, that's the bring it full circle. That argument was the Tish James Attorney General one that produced the heavy duty fine of 400 and some odd million bucks. So, I mean, that I don't think that's going anywhere as well. So it's an interesting week that we have coming up. I also think that Trump and Biden are meeting this week, if I read right. Did you hear this as well?
I did hear this as well. I'm not exactly certain what day it is, but I know that there was an invitation extended, and I believe Trump has accepted it. And I think that they will be meeting sometime this coming week. I also saw an interesting story right before we got on that Trump is now offering to pay off some of the potential debts that exist with the Harris campaign. That could just be Trump being Trump, but it was an interesting headline that I saw just in the moments before we recorded. We're recording for anyone who, we're in a fast information world right now. So we're recording this on Saturday for anyone who may be hearing it on Sunday morning, and some of the facts may have changed. But yeah, that's the meeting that I believe is happening this week. And I'm sure it will be a vastly different meeting than the one that President-elect Trump had with then outgoing President Biden, which was widely reported on as being much longer than they anticipated. And I'm sure this time it will be a much more brief meeting.
You never know. You never know. I mean, there's various things that I can imagine that'll be on the agenda, and we'll just have to wait and see how it pans out. There was a phenomenal, for whatever you say, Pat. You remember Pat Summerall? You're not too young to have forgotten Pat Summerall. His daughter, Susie Wilds, was named chief of staff, first female presidential chief of staff, and widely acclaimed as talk about a career. She's got some wins in the W's in the win column that are astonishing, frankly, and she's going to be the chief of staff and does not seem to relish the public eye. He's tried to introduce her, have her come up to the lectern several times. And
she always resists and tries to stay out of it. But I think that that's probably going to serve her well in the new role that she's taken on. And it's been pretty widely reported that she held out on saying yes to that job for a couple days at least to try to attempt to make sure that she had assurances that she would have more power and more of a standing than some of her predecessors in that job in the previous Trump administration. So it should be interesting to see what, someone like her, who was by all accounts one of the main, orchestrators of the campaign. And I don't think there's anything to call that but a success at this point, whether you feel one way about it or another. He cleared the popular vote at this point, obviously with some states still counting by, 4 million votes and won the electoral contest decisively. So she certainly, I believe, has earned a shot at that job. So it'll be interesting to see what she does with it.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant pick, and it'd be interesting to see how he fills out everything else. I mean, it's quite a run, and give him credit. I don't think anybody ever expected that he would be able to weather the storm on all of these cases, especially the federal and the state. I always, how I feel about both of these state cases. I'm early and often on the fact that they couldn't have been more bullshit. Excuse my not a legal term, but they were literally the most ridiculous prosecutions. So I've said it before, and I'm not going to say it again. I'll just say that there should, both of those state cases were not brought by special counsel. So I can't lay it at the feet of the special counsel, but this idea of state or county prosecutors coming after federal office holders is just something doesn't rival the special counsel, independent counsel nonsense, but it's something that we just ought to eliminate and get the criminalization of politics out of it. When I say that as somebody, once again, I've been saying this for 30 years. I said it when it was coming at Democrats. I said when it's directed at the Republicans. It's just not something you should inject into the political sphere.
No, I don't think that it's done any favors for the people on both sides. I think that it's just widened the division and driven quite a wedge and a distrust into the electorate. And I think that that's somewhat, revealed in the kind of result that we got here that I'm not sure anyone necessarily saw coming. Well,
and by the way, for those who have argued all along that this is lawfare or that this is the Justice Department doing the bidding, the fact that November 8th, a day after the concession by the current vice president, within one day, that the special counsel is filing, we've got to reassess. I mean, even if you're not a constitutional scholar, even if you're not somebody who's in the weeds on the cases and the reasons for it, there's only one logical ramification of that is, okay, we tried to take him out before the election. The election happened. He won. So now we're going to give up. That it makes his argument that it was all political in the first place.
Yeah, I think it was 2 days because I think the concession was on the 6th, but nonetheless, your point is still well taken that it's, it's just to your point about the government consulted with defense counsel who does not object to this request. I would argue they probably sent a balloon arrangement to Mr. Smith's office. They were probably overjoyed by this motion and this, as you said, tacit admission.
Yeah. And there's no other way to look at it that within hours of the election result that you're giving up on this federal prosecution that you thought was great. Like I said, we should stop criminalizing politics.
Couldn't agree more. Mark, thank you so much for finding some time on this weekend and for accommodating my somewhat unusual schedule so that we can make sure we had some new content for people on Sunday morning. Looking forward to having you back in LA and seeing you in the office later this week.
You got it, Gary. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.